2020 was a year of dramatic digital transformation. Every business was forced to rip up its marketing plan and think digital and mobile first. McKinsey report we've catapulted 5 years forward in consumer and business digital adoption in just a matter of 8 weeks. Around the world, Facebook helps 200 million businesses reach over 3 billion customers on our platforms. And businesses of any size have access to free e-commerce tools and advertising solutions that only the largest brands used to have. Never before have our digital solutions been so critical for businesses. And on the personal side, private messaging continues to be one of the fastest growing forms of communication. Over 100 billion messages are exchanged on WhatsApp every single day. I'm Anita Fox, and I lead the automotive team at Facebook UK. And I'm witnessing my clients transform at a pace I've never seen before. And what I'm also seeing is the benefits have been measurable. Car retailing groups have acknowledged in their trading reports last year how digital transformation is stripping out costs. ASE Group report that in 2020, retailers who embraced interaction with customers virtually significantly outperformed their peers. And that they also saw was that they delivered a marked differential in performance with those brands that adopted digital technologies. By lockdown 2.0 last year, most retailers had enabled click to reserve on their websites, click and collect or offered home delivery. We're now starting to accept e-signatures on contracts without expecting people to walk in and sign in person. And we were seeing far more commonplace video demonstrations of vehicles, with sales staff sharing their screens with their customers remotely, helping them configure vehicles, sharing of brochures or running them through contract terms without physically seeing them. However, I do perceive that now we've entered 21, some businesses are starting to count down the days and the weeks before they can return to the old ways. At Facebook, we believe businesses need to reset their processes in 21, as opposed to restoring the old ones. The Facebook IQ team conducted worldwide research last August and September, just after retailers around the world reopened. And that was to understand whether the changes I've mentioned in consumer behaviour were momentary or actually here to stay. We identified in the UK that nearly 1 in 2 car intenders expect to be able to buy a car online. And as expected, this is significantly higher for younger audiences. But I think what was more surprising is people buying a car of £30,000 or more have the same attitude. Part of that research, we examined 21 steps in the car buying process, from determining which options and features someone might take, getting their trade-in valued, reviewing the pricing, financial options, and negotiating the deal, through to finally signing paperwork remotely with e-signatures. Now, we found as many as 1 in 5 people claim they would do all those steps online without visiting or communicating with a salesperson. And we believe we're now at a tipping point where consumer expectations are way ahead of the current breadth of e-commerce offering across our industry. But above everything else, we also learned that people want choice. At least 1 in 2 new car intenders are comfortable doing any one of these steps without visiting a dealership or interacting with a salesperson. Whilst on the flip of a coin, the other half still prefer to have some human contact. And that is because people buy from people. Now, when I was at Volvo, our dealer training academy imprinted this concept on every new recruit. We know a good sales consultant can enhance the customer experience, and customer services is a brand differentiator, and it certainly contributes towards to brand loyalty. And having worked in a car brand, I know how much emphasis is placed on customer satisfaction scores, because cars are one of, if not one of the most expensive purchase considerations that anyone ever makes. They're increasingly personalised. New emerging technologies with the electrification is just making the product so much more complicated. So it's only natural that consumers find reassurance discussing aspects of their purchase with a sales consultant. Now, I'll move back to our research. We found that 83% of people needed some form of help from a sales consultant when making a purchase decision for a car. And that's a huge proportion. 46% told us the salesperson helped them select features. 34% of consumers needed help with their finance. So whilst the need for human interaction hasn't changed, how they connect with one another has. Whether that's connecting digitally because it's still not safe to meet physically, or whether we believe longer term people are going to enjoy the convenience to be able to connect from the comfort of their homes. And again, if I go back to our research, there are still consumers that see negotiating as a thrill. And I'm sure you know who those people are. And these people value the power of actually being in the showroom. They believe that their ability to walk away is actually part of how they negotiate. And then we flip that coin. Nearly 1/3 of new car intenders would prefer to negotiate remotely. And that's actually nearly doubled. And that's nearly actually half of consumers in the age groups 18 to 34. These people tell us it's important that they can do negotiations at their own pace. They prefer to do it when they're in a place that they're comfortable, and they're more likely to stay firm on their decision. So when we think about digital retailing, what's evident is that options are more complex than a consumer deciding whether it's just purely online or offline. Consumer choice will be the new competitive advantage. Car brands and their retailers need to be able to create this purchase journey that allows the consumer to navigate if and how they interact with you, alongside when and where they interact with you. The challenge we now face is how OEMs and their retailers synchronize in this omni-channel environment. And we see there are areas where everyone can improve here. And what I'll end on is that our research tells us that 7 in 10 businesses surveyed think they're communicating effectively with customers. Yet when we ask consumers, just 2 in 10 agree. On a Facebook point of view, as I mentioned earlier, we see messaging is increasingly helping to bridge the communication gap, help consumers get timely responses and the help they're looking for throughout their car buying experience. We work alongside the team at Rapid RTC, who help retailers handle customer inquiries smarter and more effectively, carefully tailoring their solutions to fit with the showroom floor activities. So I'll hand over now to Pontus to share with you some of his insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. There's no question that new technologies are being implemented at a record pace, and you just captured that perfectly in your presentation. There's so much variation in the buying process itself, and the vehicles are becoming more and more complex, and especially with electrification, like you pointed out. It's clear that salespeople can and will continue to add tremendous value and create trust in this sales process. We need to ensure that they have a way of continuing doing so with the changes that we're living through. I'm Pontus Riska, heading up Rapid RTC here in the UK. And following on from Anita's presentation, I will be diving a little bit deeper into the implementation of the changes. At Rapid RTC, everything we do is centered around connecting the digital customer with the salesperson. So we'll have some interesting to share with you as we go through this presentation. All these new technologies are being implemented at a record speed, which is great news for the industry. But the next challenge for us really to consider is how we're embedding these changes into our businesses. According to Harvard Business Review, there was about 1.3 trillion spent on digital transformation last year. 1 trillion would have 12 zeros after it, just to put it into perspective. And one can ask the question, what is the ROI on this kind of investment? McKinsey estimate that an industry like ours would see something like 4 to 11% ROI on these kind of investments. That's not to suggest that these kind of changes are in vain, but it serves as a great reminder that we must make sure that these changes are implemented properly, embedded into the businesses, and not just done as a tick box exercise. And it all centers around digital transformation. We see that technology itself and the digital component is the enabler of this kind of changes. However, the outcome that we're looking for really is to achieve the transformation in the businesses. And this is really important because McKinsey again report that 23% of dealers, whilst they saw improvement, they didn't find that these changes were actually sustainable in the business. So again, we must make sure that those who are using the new technologies and processes really understand the benefits of working in these new ways. Now, we come across an enormous amount of data as part of the services that we provide, with about 1/3 of the franchise dealers using the products. There's been tons of data collected over the past year, and obviously it's been a very unusual year for us all. I just wanted to share with you some of the data that we've seen as we worked our way through this year of change. And as you can see on the graph in front of you, we plotted the customer inquiry trends over 2020 compared to 2019. And looking at the very beginning of this, you'll see that we started the year on a very traditional level of customer engagement. And then as the news of lockdown hit us, we saw a gradual decrease in March, and found ourselves at the bottom of that trend in April. And then when news emerged of a lockdown, certainly in England, coming to an end towards June, we saw the inquiry trends change. And you can see here that in May, we already hit similar volumes that we had in 2019 at that time of the year. And then it's well documented that in June, the inquiry levels increased to a record level. But really what strikes me is that when you look at the difference between April and June, there's 215% increase there between the 2 months. The change for retailers to be able to adapt to that level of change has been tremendous. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're also sort of recognizing that the year of 2020 was a big year of planning and change, constantly evaluating what's going to happen next. And hats off really to everybody who's worked their way through this process. Overall, as you look at the year, you can see that the 2020 line is much higher than the 2019 line. And that really results in a 22% increase, cumulative increase year on year on these digital inquiries from customers. And considering the fact that we spent a quarter of the year in some form of lockdown, that's pretty tremendous. Now, as we speak, we're in lockdown again, 3.0 this time. And there's been loads of anticipation around what customers are doing in recognition of the fact that we're again restricted from being able to do the normal things that we're used to doing. And our data insights team did some analysis on inquiries that we received during the first couple of weeks of January, and I just wanted to share some of that data with you. The data can be the inquiries can be categorized into 3 main buckets, where you can see that 16% of inquiries that we received in those first 2 weeks were really operational questions from customers. Can I still come and see you? Are you open, etc. Then another 33% can be categorized into the after-sales inquiry bucket, and obviously a much more sort of traditional questions, considering the ability to still service vehicles. Now, finally, we saw that every second inquiry was still some way or form around sales, new or used. And just to share with you, here are also the top questions asked by the customers in those processes. And what strikes me really is that these are questions very, very similar to those that would be asked during normal open hours. It's an indicator that there's still a level of interest from customers in being able to purchase new or used vehicles. Now, also interesting is to consider when the customers are looking to converse with retailers. And we did an analysis on the December inquiries from customers. And as you can see here, we plotted when during the working day and the day more generally, customers were looking to converse with retailers. And the area in white highlights the traditional opening hours. And that's 2/3 of conversations from customers that fall into those categories. So that still means that every 1 in 3 conversations are initiated by customers during closed hours or when retailers traditionally aren't open. But really what strikes me that with the right tools, retailers are still working with customers and responding to some of these conversations. And it's a great way of exceeding customers' expectations. When you're not entirely sure if you can actually connect to somebody who can answer the questions and you can achieve that in the evening, it sets up for a really great experience for customers. I often get asked, what is the best way for customers or retailers to converse? Which of these channels should we take use of to maximize our chances of engaging well with customers? And the fact is that there is no one size that fits all. It's nicely exemplified by McKinsey, who categorize customers into these 4 different types. And just by reading the names that they give into the customers, one can see that they will all experience or look for a different blend of online and offline channels in their communication style. So ultimately, what it comes down to is the ability to offer up multiple choices for customers to take use of, so that they can use the channel that best fits them then and there. And again, Anita, you put it very well earlier, that customer choice will be the new competitive advantage in the future. In addition to all these multiple different channels, it's really important to find consistency in channels. And that's so well exemplified by a company that we all recognize and know well, Disney namely. And if you consider Disney, and you might have been to a theme park, a cruise, a store, or even watched Disney Plus on the TV, and one of the things that you'll no doubt recognize is that your experience is always unmistakably a Disney experience. It doesn't matter which type of connection or channel you're using to converse through or experience, you're always going to have that same consistent experience. And that's why Disney often gets used as a good example of a great omni-channel experience. So one of the recommendations I often give to retailers is to, if you haven't done so already, test your own experience and test how closely your own experience mirrors this Disney level of consistency as you look to reach out to your business and get questions answered. And also think about, are you able to get connected to the salespeople so that they can answer your questions? Ultimately, again, Anita, you put it so nicely earlier, people buy from people. We refer to this as man and machine working together. What you can achieve through this process is a blended communication style that really takes use of both of these skills and capabilities. And ultimately, the customers still need to interact with the salesperson. It's just, again, Anita, you said it so well, it's how they interact that's going to change. And to give you an example of this, we can use the Facebook experience. You can now have a process whereby customers are experiencing a traditional Facebook journey. They might be served up a tailored ad that suits their interest. And customers may browse this experience and then find themselves interested in what's being served up to them. From there, they could initiate a messenger conversation and just basically want to find out more. Now, they initiate those conversations. One of the things that they're looking for is quick answers. So now what you can have is you can have a online receptionist greeting the customer as they start their conversations. Some questions might be answered straight away. In other cases, the receptionist may want to then link the customer to somebody at the retailer. That person at the retailer might be carrying on their day and working as normal, and then be paged by the concierge to say, look, there's somebody on a messenger conversation who needs your help. At that point of time, the customer and the retailer can get connected together, and the retailer can help the customer with the questions that they have. All this time, the customer is experiencing a seamless messenger experience, but ultimately, big need from their side is fulfilled, which is they wanted their questions answered, and the salesperson gets a chance to have a great dialogue with the customer. A perfect example of man and machine working well together. Now, you might ask yourself the question, why is it so important to do it? And our data insights team spent time to look through tens of thousands of conversations like these, and they found that 40% of you can increase your conversion to sale with 40%, where you manage to connect the customer with the retailer, and they can have this real-time conversation together rather than disrupting the journey and maybe forcing the customer out of the experience or causing delay into the experience. So there's no doubt that we've taken some significant leaps forward in our digital transformation. And this has benefited us as businesses in an otherwise really, really difficult year. These changes, though, like Anita said, were always required, with or without the COVID and resulting lockdowns. Now it's critical that we embed these processes and we really get benefits from these processes, we sustain them, and we have a chance of really promoting and taking use of the experience that our sales teams have. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. And Anita, thank you so much for your presentation as well. Look forward to some questions later on. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the live Q&A session for embracing the paradigm shift. I hope you enjoyed Anita and Pontus's presentations. Thank you very much, both of you, for doing those. Thank you everyone for coming to AM Live. We're delighted to have you here. We've got about 10 minutes or so to talk through your questions. Please use the chat feature to let us know what questions you'd like to ask. I can't promise I'll be able to ask them all, but I'll do my very best. So to start with the question we've already had, actually, if I may, and if I can, I'll ask Anita to kick us off, as it were, with the answer. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of digitization during the pandemic. You know, is this something that's here to stay, and how do dealers build that digitization into the core of their business going forward?
Oh, good morning, Tim. That's such a great way to start. So thank you for having us here today. Look, I think the research that we conducted, and it was in August and September last year, was very clear, because we had come out of lockdown. So we were kind of going back to a little bit of normality, and consumers are adamant that the convenience of buying a car remotely is something they value. And I think the other thing we saw is that choice is really important, that not every customer fits into this perfect mold of they're going to buy online, they're going to buy offline. There's this balance of different steps needing different things. I was listening intently to Dash earlier, where he talked about click and collect has taken off. And whilst he's only got a sample of 100 and he's not yet willing to put a bet on which way it's going to go, we can see that people want click and collect. And we can see that people want to negotiate remotely, because doing it like I am here talking to you today from the comfort of my home, able to stay firm on my decision and not feel pressurized in an environment, or as we see with different demographics, it's just a more comfortable way of doing it. I don't think just because the showroom opens up, that's going to change. So the importance of now being comfortable talking as we are today virtually, still having human contact, but just doing it in a digital way, enabling it digitally, is going to be here for good.
Pontus, do you have anything to add to that view?
Yeah,
I'm sure you do.
Good morning, everybody. As you can imagine, I just echo what Anita said. It's ultimately one size doesn't fit all, and it's about really tracking which trends settle down as we kind of work our way through what we are currently in, and you know what's happening currently in lockdown 3.0 might be a little bit different as we go into May. But you know, I think we're firm believers is that much of what we've learned and picked up in this previous half a year, 9 months, is here to stay, really, as a new model of retailing.
Let me pick up on something you mentioned there, Pontus, which is the trends. So I'm interested in two things from you. Firstly, what's the experience of Facebook in terms of results? That will be interesting to hear a bit more about. And secondly, from both of you, what are the early trends in 2021? What are, you know, how's that changing, you know, right now?
Well, if I just start off with one of the trends in 2021, the trend is we're in lockdown again, aren't we? So inquiries and just conversations from retailers through digital means have actually gone slightly up from December, and probably driven by the fact that it's the only way that you can really converse, apart from picking up the phone and phoning directly. So we've seen them increasing. We shared a little bit about the nature of those types of questions that are coming through from customers as well. How it now continues is when we're all watching it intently, aren't we, to understand how consumers are reacting to the current situation. But early signs is a little bit of an increase.
Thanks, Pontus. Anita, what about the Facebook experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we worked with DS last year, and within 3 weeks, they turned from not having a messaging-enabled solution to getting one live. And we know that consumers, we talk about wanting to operate remotely, but we're seeing the surge away from email to more immediate contact, So messaging is really taking a place in people's expectations in terms of how they can now talk to a business. So DS switched on messaging with us in 3 weeks and saw that the level of inquiries that they got increased by 76% versus sending somebody to a website to fill in a form. And that's phenomenal. I mean, that starts to change the efficiency phenomenally. But then you need people or concierge or contact center teams ready to handle that inquiry back in the same platform that someone's inquired in. And that requires a little bit more immediacy. That requires a different skill set of people, maybe getting more into chats and conversations. So I think the trends we need to see are people that are comfortable starting conversations more in the way we personally talk, which is now messaging. It's shorter, it's perpetual. So, you start a conversation, you might go and make the dinner and then expect an answer back and then respond at another time. So conversations have changed quite fundamentally. And we're used to it in our private worlds. Consumers want to do it in their business worlds, but business worlds haven't quite yet caught up. And I think that's the next big change that we're going to see.
That concierge point you're making there actually resonates with some of the audience we've got here, I think, because there's some questions coming through about the kind of the balance between people and machine, and I think what drives that is a worry that a purely digital relationship isn't going to build the rapport that a physical relationship might be able to do. So what's the view of this blended approach? How should it be a blended approach, and if so, how does that work?
I think it's fundamental, to be honest. Ultimately, we have this massive advantage of all of this technology that we can take use of. But as we know from all of the lockdown process that we've been through, what we're all craving for really is personalization, personal touch to what's going on, and being able to really have a sort of a human contact and interpersonal contact. So the trick really is to use technology to find efficiencies and make personal interactions as efficient as possible, but not to take that away from the conversation. You can't replace a person, a human, with technology alone. But technology can make a person more effective at using our skills and our behaviors for those relationships.
Yeah, and we work across not just the automotive industry, so we get to see how messaging is really transforming a lot of different businesses. When things are small and personal, and the purchase of a car is really, really personal, it's a high ticket item, there's a point at which you need that human contact. We're not moving away from human contact, I think, in that sense. But when you start to scale an operation, contact centers need that balance of how do you triage all the inquiries? How do you work out what the gold hot I want to buy now people, how do you find those in the system? And that's where AI and machine learning is absolutely transforming. So, you look at like brands like Samsung, a tech company who would expect to adopt tech really, really quickly. And they've got a 75 strong call center where an AI machine learning bot talks in the tone of voice of Samsung, understands the brand, is understanding the frequently asked questions and knowing how to correctly answer them. But then there's a handover protocol. So when it identifies someone's actually not able to get the answer they need in the automated piece and needs a real human, it flips you straight into an agent, and there's 75 people there ready to catch. And I think that's the power of actually using the machine and the man together to scale an operation to extreme efficiency. I can share a case study on the efficiencies they've gained. And we're not there with the automotive world. We're still in catch-up mode. We can see it's happening. We're doing small bits with like the personal side of things, but I think it's when the contact centers really embrace this and start to use the AI, scale it, but then get the human involved at the point at which the customer wants to purchase or ask a really pertinent question. And then we'll get a really seamless customer journey that benefits the consumer as well as the business.
Thank you, Anita. One of the themes as well coming out of questioning is it's kind of making this process real in the sense of, it needs to be sustained. One of the questions I've got is about people. Is this new people, or is it reskilled people, or is it a blend of the two? How do you make this change process real and sustainable? What are the challenges and solutions there?
It's a great point. I can get it going. I know you'll jump in here as well. blend is, I think, the word that you use there, and that's genuinely the most practical answer as well. There is a change because, like Anita touched on earlier, there is the way a conversation now happens needs to reflect how we all use messaging services in our daily lives, and it's not necessarily the same way that a phone call would have happened 10 years ago when we live and talking to the customer, and that takes obviously some adaptation. We can't just sort of flick a switch and go from one means to the other and expect to do so seamlessly. But that doesn't mean that current sort of staff in retailers can't do that change. So we shouldn't ignore the training aspect of being able to learn to converse in these new digital channels. Ultimately, as we then recruit new staff, clearly it's important to bear in mind the skill sets that we really need in this sort of new environment, where we partly have to learn to work with customers through these digital channels, but also the fact that customers are now really quite educated by the time that they reach out to retailers for advice. So we must make sure that product knowledge is there to help and answer those questions, so that it adds to that value that the customer expects to have when they do make contact.
Mm. And I think building on that, there's a shift that needs to happen within a sales environment, which is going to be very natural for some generations and some people that have adopted now to just talking remotely without having that physical contact. And then that is also a skill set that I think we need to recruit for as we move forward, because the whole world has had to adapt. We all learned digital skills last year that we probably had never had before. We're doing our home, we're exercising at home via virtual Zooms, through to, everybody having to buy groceries online that maybe didn't, of a generation that we would never have expected, the 70-year-old pluses who were shielding, who we never really would have thought would be digitally savvy, who now do not leave their houses and have everything come to them. So I think recruiting is going to be interesting because there's a whole generation that's just been brought up in this way. Some people that have made a lot of money using video and broadcasting themselves to gain influencers and, find ways of selling them and their businesses online. And I think that's where this shift is moving to, that businesses now need to recognise they also bring that skill set into the fold. And I think an interesting thing is, when we were talking just before this session, you were asking me, like, if a recruiting manager doesn't necessarily have those skills themselves, how can you possibly find them when you're bringing new people into the business? And something I look to at Facebook is we always have a recruiting loop which involves 4 people, not just the hiring manager, because the skills we're looking for are much broader than what any one person can deliver. So any new person trying to secure a role within the Facebook organisation would meet 4 different hiring managers, so that you get that blend of skills. People can tap into different knowledge skill sets, and make sure the person we're bringing in really does have that full-rounded scope and can work in an environment that's quite ambiguous, which I guess training for ambiguity is a new skill we need to think about.
Guys, we've reached the end of our allotted time. My God, is ever there is an awful lot of things we need to learn, and I must say, learning those things is going to be an awful lot easier with people like you around to provide us with some insight and to help us get there. So thank you very much for your time and your contribution. And thank you everyone else for coming both to AM Live and to this session in particular. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much.